Our last lesson for this lecture is going to center around contrast coding in regression. And the reason that folks may want to do contrast coding is because they would not want to test all possible combinations of, differences in means. So imagine that you had a predictor with 10 different categories. So this probably wouldn't happen in your research too often, but let's just say that you had 9 clinics that you wanted to test the difference in means across those clinics, and you had some specific hypotheses regarding which clinics would be different from other clinics. So if you had 10 different clinics, this would mean you'd need to create 9 codes if you're using the dummy coding method, and then you would have one is the reference group, and then you would be comparing that to the rest, and you would have 9K just for that variable. So just for this variable of clinics, you would have 9 for your numerator DF. And that is a lot of numerator DF for just one categorical variable. And so recall that we want to be able to reduce the number of K as much as possible. And in particular, if you have a good idea of which clinics will differ from others, then you can run a contrast code that will use up 1 DF rather than 9. So with dummy coding, we also have this kind of constraint, and that is that we couldn't test if the first 4 groups were different from the other 6, for example. So the first 4 clinics, are they different from the average of the other 6 clinics? And so all we can do is kind of set a reference group and then compare every group to that. We can't divide and say that there will be 3 clinics that will be different from the other 7, or there will be 4 that will be different from the other 6, or 5 will be different from the other 5. And so remember that in ANOVA, you did this thing called a planned comparison where you made a contrast, and you had an a priori theory of which groups would differ from one another, and then you would make that contrast and then test it. And that increases your power, reduces your alpha, of course, your type 1 error rate, remember. And it also, in regression, saves DF, and that's super important to save numerator DF if you can. All right, so there is a reference that is posted on Blackboard and that is listed here in the notes at the bottom of the slide, and it's titled Contrast Coding in Multiple Regression Analysis, Strengths, Weakness, and Utility, etc. So this is just a reference for you if you are indeed come across a case in future research where you have 15, let's say, different categories, and you want to be able to contrast the first 5 against the average of the other 10, then if you wanted to understand how to make that contrast code correctly, you would go to this article. I find it very helpful for a reference. So it's not like you have to know it for this class. It's just there for your use later if you need it. And it's fairly recent, and it's in the Journal of Data Science.